is a day that ended in tragedy for three of the biggest names in the music business. Buddy Holly of the Crickets, Ritchie Valens, and also the Big Bopper.
They were three of rock and roll's greatest stars, and in the late 1950s, their music rocked the nation.
If you knew Peggy Blue, then you'd know why I feel blue without Peggy.
Buddy Holly's music lifted you up with a passion of happiness that wouldn't let go after the record was over.
Ritchie truly was one of the first ethnic artists to cross over.
Hello, baby. Yeah, this is the Big Bopper speaking.
Hello, baby, is just one of the most indelible little hooks that anybody's ever created.
In the winter of 1959, Destiny brought Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper together.
The Winter Dance Party. A 3-week jaunt through the heart of the Midwest. The part of America that freezes solid in February.
You are, as we feverishly try to put together the story.
He said, Bob, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. are dead. Their plane crashed. They're dead.
40 years ago, on February 3rd, 1959, in a frozen Iowa cornfield, rock and roll suffered its first and greatest tragedy.
It was just horrible. Big memories was horrible.
I remember this like yesterday. No tears. It just, heroes aren't supposed to die.
It was the end of an era. It was the end of an innocence for rock and roll.
It was the day the music died.
I wish I had at least had an opportunity to have said goodbye.
So bye-bye, Miss American Pie.
Now, through rare footage, seldom seen photos, and the voices of those who lived it, Behind the Music looks back at the day that changed the course of rock and roll, the day that inspired an anthem,
This'll be the day that I die.
the day the music died.
This'll be the day that I die. Long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I knew if I had my chance that I could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me shiver with every paper I deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride, but something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
On February 2nd, 1959, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, known as the Big Bopper, took the stage of the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, and played before a packed house of ecstatic teenagers. It was the biggest night the small town had ever experienced. For the three stars, it would be the last night of their lives.
Walking into the Surf Ballroom is like walking into a time machine. As you walk across an empty ballroom and you hear your footsteps just echo off the walls, you want to imagine Buddy Holly up there performing, Ritchie Valens up there performing, the Big Bopper, his ho-ho-hos in a long jacket. And you try to imagine that, you really do. It's a time machine.
I'm not going to get spiritual and say I have felt their presence and heard their songs and echoes in there, but I have stood on that stage and said, why did it happen that they had to die?
Rock and roll exploded onto the music scene in 1954 with Bill Haley and the Comets and Elvis Presley.
Rock and roll is cool, Daddy, and you know it.
Their fusion of white country swing and black rhythm and blues ignited teen spirit.
Elvis was a white dude singing black music, black style. And when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Buddy Holly saw him, he said, I can't believe somebody could do that on network television. And that just changed Buddy.
You knew when you looked at him, he knew what he wanted. He wanted to be a singing star.
Buddy Holly's rapid rise to stardom began on September 7th, 1936, with his birth in Lubbock, Texas. Young Buddy lived for music, and by the mid-1950s, he was a teenage rock and roll prodigy, anxious to make his mark.
He became very impatient when he seen other fellows about his age breaking into music like Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers. He knew he was just as good or better than they were.
Buddy formed a band with his friends Jerry Allison, Nicky Sullivan, and Joe B. Malden. They called themselves the Crickets. It was 1957, and before the year was out, Buddy Holly would be a star.
Buddy went to see The Searchers, a John Ford movie. John Wayne said every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, he would say, "That'll be the day, Pilgrim." Holly wrote the song.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry.
By September 57, That'll Be the Day was the #3 song in the nation. Within months, Buddy scored another big hit with a song named for drummer Jerry Allison's girlfriend.
If you knew Peggy Sue, then you know why I feel blue without Peggy.
Jerry said, well, let's put Peggy Sue's name on there, because at that time, I wasn't speaking to Jerry. So I think Buddy was kind of playing a little bit of Cupid.
Peggy Sue, oh, how I yearn for you, oh, Peggy.
The song worked. Jerry and Peggy Sue got married, and in just 4 months, Peggy Sue made the top 10, selling over 1 million copies.
Your big hit right from the start, or has it been sort of a long...
Well, we've had a few rough times, I guess you say, but we've been real lucky getting it this quick.
Well, Texas, nice to have you up here.
Thank
Let's
you,
have
Doc.
a very nice hand for these Texas records.
With 2 hits climbing the charts, Buddy and his band played their first national tour with some of rock and roll's biggest names, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, and Eddie Cochran. It was a grueling tour, and when it was over, Nicky Sullivan quit the Crickets.
That tour took more out of me than anything I had ever done in my life. Think about your own self for a moment, that you had to work 21 hours a day, and that had gone on for about 5 months. Something has to give, and I gave.
Oh, my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've ever missing, no boy.
Buddy and the Crickets continued as a trio, and by January of '58, they had their 3rd top 10 hit in less than a year. Oh boy.
What you got coming up in the future for records? Well, we've got one that was just released the other day by the Crickets called Oh Boy. That'll mean that you've got 3 songs in our chart if that comes up. How do you think it compares with the others? Well, I like Oh Boy better than That'll Be the Day, but of course I'm no judge.
All my life, I've been waiting, and there'll be no hesitation, no boy.
Less than a year after they began, Buddy and his band were now huge stars, and their fame spread to England and Australia. But as quickly as success had come, it wasn't fast enough for 21-year-old Buddy Holly.
He acted like he didn't have enough time to do what he wanted to do. I don't know whether he thought maybe his life would be cut short or his career would be cut short, or he was just in a hurry to do something and get it over. He grew up in a hurry.
Just you know why.
Buddy fell in love in the summer of '58. While visiting New York, he met a young woman working at a record company. As usual, Buddy moved fast, and within 2 months, he and Maria Elena Santiago were married.
No true love was.
He proposed to her on their first date, and she asked him, or told him rather, or in her words, that you haven't known me long enough. He says, well, I haven't got time. That sounds like Buddy. I haven't got time.
Holly moved to New York to be with his new bride, and near the heart of the music business. The Crickets' Jerry Allison and Joe B. Malden stayed in Texas.
As the group started to split up, Buddy withdrew a little bit because he was hurt that we would walk away from all of this fame and fortune.
Oh, misery, misery.
By December 1958, Buddy Holly was an anxious young man, without a band and without a hit record.
Buddy had recorded some new songs which had come out and disappointed him as far as charts. He got up to the 50s and he got up to the 40s, so was not having number ones and number twos again.
Not only had his career hit a lull, but 22-year-old Buddy needed money.
He had a lot of holdings. He had a lot of publishing money due him and things like that, but he didn't have cash in his pocket.
His one option was to earn cash and boost his record sales by going back on tour.
And the only tour at that time that he could have gone on was this Winter Dance Party tour.
He was forced to go on a tour he didn't really want to go on in a time of the year when he didn't want to do it in order to make money to pay the bills for his wife and a child that was going to come along.
I know that Buddy didn't want to go.
Buddy Holly's string of top 10 hits ended in 1958. That same year, as Buddy's star was losing its luster, two new rock and roll luminaries blazed onto the charts, Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper.
Hello, baby. Yeah, this is the Big Bopper speaking.
The Big Bopper was the stage name of J.P. Richardson, a Beaumont, Texas disc jockey with a talent for funny ad-libs and a knack for writing songs.
He knew music. Not that he was an accomplished musician. He played the guitar, but he knew music. He had a feel for music.
The Big Bopper was born Giles Perry Richardson on October 12, 1930. The eldest son of an oil field worker, J.P. grew up poor.
His roots were quite humble. He had a close family, but certainly no economic good fortune in his life.
J.P. struggled all his young life to get ahead, and by the age of 21, he was a married man determined to give his family all the things he never had.
That's basically the reason he went to the music business. You know, if he could have probably made a couple of $100 a week in radio, that would have probably done him at the time, but he couldn't.
In 1958, 27-year-old Richardson was spinning records on the radio.
I told the witch doctor I was in love with you.
A big man with a big sense of humor, he noted the popularity of novelty tunes like The Witch Doctor and The Purple People Eater, songs that made no sense, but lots of money.
What he decided he was going to do was record a record which put these two characters together. And it was called The Purple People Eater Meets the Witch Doctor.
On the flip side, the Big Bopper recorded Chantilly Lace.
Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down, a wiggle in the walk and a giggle in the talk. Make the world go round.
Well, it caught on. It just simply caught on. The Purple People Eater Meets the Witch Doctor was immediately forgotten, and Chantilly Lace was the rage.
Oh, baby, that's the one I like.
By the fall of 1958, Chantilly Lace made the top 10 and was one of the most played records in the country.
Oh, baby, you know what I like.
The song promised to give the Bopper, his wife, and family the financial security they yearned for. But he needed to promote the record, and to do that, he had to take his music on the road. So in December of '58, the Big Bopper was booked on the Winter Dance Party tour.
He didn't like to be away from his family. That was the hardest thing in the world for him.
At the airport, J.P. hugged his 5-year-old daughter, Deborah, and said goodbye to his wife, Teetsy, who was 6 months pregnant with their second child.
She didn't want him to go, but they knew that, this was a special thing for him. I mean, with Buddy and Ritchie and Dion and the Belmonts, and, these are people that Mother had heard of and listened to, and, it was quite an exciting thing for him.
The Big Bopper then headed north to join the Winter Dance Party.
Well, come on, let's go, little darling, and tell me that you never leave me. Come on, let's go, again.
For 17-year-old Ritchie Valens, the youngest star on the tour, the Winter Dance Party was the high point of a career that was just starting to take off.
He was so excited about the stars that he was going to meet. And he was very, very excited about meeting Buddy Holly.
Well, I got a gal, she knows just what to do.
You have to realize that his career was 8 months long. From the time he was discovered, he recorded the first album until February 3rd, '59. And he packed a lot of living into 8 months,
Ritchie Valens was born Richard Valenzuela on May 13, 1941. The second of 5 children, his life in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles was difficult. He was only 10 years old when his father died, leaving the family in poverty.
It was a rough childhood. I would say a very rough childhood, because in the first place, he came from a very poor family.
These are small little wooden houses on wood sills, and under the house they scooped out so people were sleeping under there, and that's where Ritchie was sleeping.
His main goal in life was to make records so he could make money and buy his mom a new home, and that's all he talked about.
Ritchie began playing the guitar as a young boy, and by the time he was in his teens, he was already winning fans.
All along, he knew he was going to be a star. He just knew it. At school, when we had concerts, he just rocked the place. I mean, we were rocking and rolling.
Ritchie's energetic style attracted the attention of record producer Bob Keane.
Here was this kind of a bull-like guy standing with a young fella, and he was cranking away on a guitar with a little beat-up amp, and he was just really cooked.
Keane signed Ritchie Valenzuela to a deal and promptly changed his name.
Being Latin could have been a very big deterrent for him, but fortunately I got the idea to change his name so nobody knew what he was before he got out there and got his face in front of people.
Well, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go, little darling, and tell me that you never leave.
In the summer of '58, Ritchie released his first record, Come On, Let's Go. By autumn, it was on the national charts. Ritchie's biggest hit came next, a song dedicated to his best girl, Donna.
He called me up on the telephone one night, and he said, I wrote a song for you.
While Donna made teens swoon, its flip side, La Bamba, got them dancing.
Ritchie Valens was a very important figure. Ritchie Valens was the first Chicano rock and roll star.
I mean, he was truly a pioneer in that sense, and young. I mean, who knows what he would have gone on to do, given the cojones he had, but also the smarts that he had and the talent that he had.
As Ritchie's popularity soared, his manager Bob Keane pushed to keep him before the public. He even landed Ritchie a feature role in the rock and roll movie Go Johnny Go. In December of '58, just 7 months after Ritchie was discovered, Keane booked him on his first big tour, the Winter Dance Party. Friends and family were proud to see him go.
I had no fear that he would not return. I knew he would return.
Hi, everybody. This is Ritchie Valens. I will be on the Winter Dance Party coming your way very shortly. I will be having a ball singing for you, and I hope to see you all real soon.
Teenage rock and roll sensation Ritchie Valens was eager to join the Winter Dance Party tour in January 1959.
Even though it was a Buddy Holly tour, he was really the #1 hot shot at that time, because his record was really up there and getting an awful lot of airplay.
Well, I got a gal, she knows just what to do. She's just a rockin'. She knows what to do.
Before Ritchie left for the Midwest, his mother held a goodbye party at the new house her hit-making son had bought for her.
And my father wouldn't let me go. I didn't forgive him for that for a long, long time.
You're mine.
Ritchie's family drove him to the airport for his flight to the Midwest.
The last time we saw him was at the airport. Because I would always run to the insurance to get insurance for him. And he says, I don't need that insurance, dear. I don't need that insurance. Yes, you do. You're going to take it. And that was the last time we seen him when he left to Iowa on that tour.
I wish I had at least had an opportunity to have said goodbye.
The Winter Dance Party. A 3-week jaunt through the heart of the Midwest. The part of America that freezes solid in February. There was Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, Frankie Sardo, Dion and the Belmonts, and Buddy Holly, along with his 3 new sidemen, Waylon Jennings, Tommy Alsop, and Charlie Bunch.
Maybe, baby, I'll have you.
Buddy Holly had put together a new band for the 1959 Winter Dance Party tour, including his friend, a Texas disc jockey named Waylon Jennings.
He'd gone downtown and bought a bass, and he said, "You got 2 weeks to learn how to play that thing." I had no earthly idea what did what on the bass, but I memorized where I put my fingers on which songs.
Buddy also recruited drummer Carl Bunch and guitarist Tommy Alsop. The Winter Dance Party was ready to roll.
The middle of winter was cold, cold. I don't know whose idea it was, but it really was a bad idea.
We were going down the road, and it was 40 below, and the bus froze up.
And there we sat in a snowstorm with a bus frozen. That's not our drummer's feet got frostbite on the bus.
We got to where we hated that bus. We really did. But we were in showbiz.
3 weeks of one-night stands and all-night bus rides. 21 days of being bounced around the insides of a bus like ping pong balls.
The problem was whoever scheduled the tour. You started way over here, went 400 miles to your next venue, and then went back 30 miles from the first one to do your third one, if you know what I'm trying to say. Hopscotching back and forth.
As the bus zigzagged across the icy Midwest, tour promoters arranged to fill an open date in the schedule by booking a concert in Clear Lake, Iowa.
The General Artists Corporation called Mr. Carol Anderson at the Surf Ballroom and said, "We have an open date. It's a little bit out of our way, but we can make it. The guys can drive the bus down to Mason City. Would you be interested in the show?" And Carol said, "Bob, I have a chance to bring in Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Booper." I said, "Book the show. Absolutely, just book it." And the ticket sales just took right off.
On the 11th day of the tour, after playing 10 towns in the past 10 nights, a cold, tired, and disgusted Buddy Holly wanted to get himself and his 2 bandmates off the frigid tour bus. He decided that after the show in Clear Lake that night, they would fly ahead to the next gig.
Well, we were on the bus, and he said, when we get to Clear Lake, he said, let's see if we can't charter a plane and fly up to Fargo, North Dakota.
He was actually doing it as just kind of as a favor to us, you know, where he could get in and get a little rest and everything.
That evening, the Winter Dance Party bus limped into Clear Lake, Iowa, and the stars staggered out.
When they came in here, they were almost frostbitten.
Big Bopper was running a fever. He's just perspiring profusely.
Buddy Holly had a question for the Surf Ballroom's manager, Carol Anderson.
They wanted to get in and get ahead, and they asked me if there was a charter flight out of here.
They were tired, they were hungry. We got them some food, some at the Surf Ballroom. A couple of guys went across the street to the restaurant. And I remember Buddy getting off and asking, is there a laundromat around where we could get our clothes washed? And I guess it was the hour, there wasn't one, or it was closed or something, but I remember they could not get clothes washed there at that particular time.
That was the reason that Buddy wanted to fly, you know, so he get some laundry done. Because we'd been out 12 days and our shirts were starting to stand up on their own, you know.
The Winter Dance Party stars may have been worn out, but 1,500 local teenagers were ready to rock.
Well, we arrive at the Surf Ballroom and the line was already there, and the parents are lined up and people are waiting to get in and to buy tickets, and they just poured into the Surf Ballroom.
The floor was about 3/4 full, solid with people, up to and a few of them sat around in the first row of booths around here.
It was a big night. Nobody in that area, Northeast Iowa, had ever seen stars this big in their life. And for all of these youngsters, and for this young kid disc jockey, it was the biggest thrill of my life.
At 8 p.m., the curtains parted on the stage of the Surf Ballroom.
Hello, baby. Yeah, this is the Big Bopper speaking.
The Big Bopper came out. And he did his telephone routine and had everybody laughing.
Will I what? Oh, baby, you know what I like. Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down.
For him, we had Richie Richie Valens.
Well, the next song I'll do for you is named Donna.
Oh, my God. The girls went crazy over Richie Valens. And he was about 4 seconds into his music, and it was as Richie had been there all his life.
He was just shy, you know. But what was wild is he was wild on stage, you know. It was like two different people.
He just warmed to the kids and had everybody singing and dancing, of course, till La Bamba. And I don't know how many times he had to sing that.
It was a real up night. Everybody was rocking, and everybody having a good time, you know.
I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be.
When Buddy first started, there was that just constant cheering and yelling and cheering and yelling.
With all the kids screaming, you could just barely hear your amps. It was kind of wild, you know.
Then, when he changed the mood, he'd go into a bit of a quiet tune. And everybody would hush and listen to it.
Well, all right, so I'm being foolish. Well, all right, let people know about the dreams and wishes you wish in the night when lights are low.
The stars of the Winter Dance Party burned up the stage until midnight. While they rocked, Carol Anderson called Dwyer Flying Service to charter a plane for Buddy and his band. The plane could take up to 3 passengers at $36 apiece.
Love will be all right.
When the curtain came down, Buddy, Waylon, and Tommy Alsop rushed to catch their flight to the next stop on the tour.
Word got around amongst the performers that Holly and his 2 sidemen were going to fly out instead of busing it. The Big Bopper couldn't stand the thought of those 430 frozen miles between Clear Lake and Moorhead, next stop on the tour. He made a deal with Waylon Jennings.
He had the flu real bad. He asked me, would you let me have your place on the plane? I said, well, if it's all right with Buddy, it's okay with me.
It's funny how, 2 minutes in a life can turn around several people's lives. Yeah, Dad was about 20 pounds lighter. He might have been able to fit on that bus somewhere and get comfortable. Who knows? May never have asked.
There's a thing that happened that night. Buddy was leaning back against the wall in his cane bottom chair laughing at me because he says, you're not going on the plane tonight, huh? I said, no. He said, well, I hope your old bus freezes up. And I said, well, again, and I said, well, I hope your old plane crashes, Now, I was awful young, and it took me a long time to get over that.
As Buddy, the Big Bopper, and Tommy Alsop prepared to leave, Tommy made one last check of the dressing room and ran into Richie Valens.
Richie was standing there signing autographs. For some reason, he said, you gonna let me fly? And I just flipped a 50-cent piece and said, call it, and he called heads. And
Richie won the toss and a seat on the plane. A cold northeast wind blew as Carol Anderson drove Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper to the Mason City Airport. 21-year-old pilot Roger Peterson was waiting with a single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza.
February 3rd, 1959. Just past midnight. Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens climbed aboard a single-engine 4-seater Beechcraft Bonanza at Mason City Airport, Iowa.
6-4, Mike, affirmative.
The Big Bopper and Richie Valens crawled in the back 2 seats of the plane, and I shook hands with each one of them as they got in and wished them well. And the pilot got in. I said, have a nice trip. And Buddy Holly come up, and he was the last one to get in. I held the door open. Shook hands with Buddy Holly, and I said, I wish you only the best. And he says, thanks.
When they left the surf ballroom, the stars were shining. It was a cold, crisp northern Iowa night. My wife and I got in our car to drive home. As we're driving, the snow starts to come in right across the road, right across our lights. And I remember vividly saying to my wife, look at that. The snow is incredible. Coming right straight across the road. I hope the guys got off the ground before the storm came into town.
The U.S. Weather Bureau issued a flash advisory warning of bad weather on the plane's route. But pilot Roger Peterson never received the information.
Decatur City traffic, Bonanza 3794, November, taxiing runway 17.
It was cold and windy, snowing. Time, not quite 1 a.m. Peterson aimed the plane towards heaven.
3794, November, taking off, runway 17.
It looked to me like it was a perfect takeoff. I crawled back into the car and started up and made a turn. I looked in that direction, and I seen the lights disappear. Then I thought maybe it's the curvature of the Earth or something like that, or an illusion that I had, but it wasn't.
In the darkness, the plane carrying 3 of the biggest stars in rock and roll had just disappeared. In the pre-dawn hours of February 3rd, 1959, a plane carrying Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Ritchie Valens took off into the wintry Iowa sky.
The next morning, about 7:15, the phone rang, and I was still home, and it was Mr. Dwyer, and he says, Carol, he said, our party that went out last night never got to Fargo.
DJ Bob Hale was at radio station KIRB.
And while I was on, a little after 9 o'clock, the bulletin bell rang on the UPI telling us that there was wreckage found of a light aircraft outside the Mason City Clear Lake Airport. And I broke in with that bulletin. I didn't even think about the plane from the night before. Didn't even dawn on me. And I just read the bulletin, and we went on with music. And about 30 seconds later, the phone rang. It was Carol Anderson, the manager of the Surf Ballroom. Called. He said, Bob, I've just been out to that wreckage site of that airplane you had the bulletin on. I said, why were you there? He said, to identify the bodies. I said, what do you mean? And he said, Bob, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and JP are dead. Their plane crashed. They're dead.
Previously trying to put together a story of a happy success of 3 young singers that ended in a very sad death this morning early in the cornfield near Mason City and Clear Lake, Iowa.
The plane went down minutes after takeoff, just 5 miles northwest of the airport.
The official cause listed way back then by the FAA was pilot error. I don't believe that, because this young pilot knew that airplane, or Jerry Dwyer would not have put him in that airplane. I am convinced that it's that storm that caused the plane crash.
They knocked the snow off the roof of a house about a mile back, and that plane just gradually went into the ground.
The one wing had hit the ground and tore out a chunk of ground about 4 inches deep and about 3 foot long. And that was frozen solid, that ground. And from then on, it was just a corkscrew. I mean, it just end over end over end. And it all ended up along the line fence there. All the cables were wrapped around, the tail was up in the air.
All 3 stars were thrown from the twisted wreckage. The body of pilot Roger Peterson was pinned inside the shattered plane.
I seen 2 bodies land just 12 to 15 feet from the airplane. One was Buddy Holly and one was Ritchie Valens. And I said to Sheriff Allen, where's the third one? He said, across the line or the fence there, about 40 rows of corn in, the Big Bopper lays over there.
This is a day that ended in tragedy for 3 of the biggest names in the music business. The names in order of bigness probably would be Ritchie Valens, Buddy Holly of the Crickets, and also the Big Bopper.
The Big Bopper was 28 years old, Buddy Holly 22. Ritchie Valens was only 17.
You're mine. I had KFWB on, and just as I passed the front of the Palladium, I'll never forget it. The disc jockey said, and now the late, great Richie Valens. And it was just like somebody had hit me in the stomach with a baseball bat. I really had a tremendous physical reaction.
The announcer says 3 top rock and roll singers have been killed, and one of them is Richie Valens. I mean, I was terrified. I screamed and I couldn't. It's pretty hard to even talk about it.
We had a schoolmate come and say, aren't you Richie Valens' sister? And I was like, yeah, well, he's dead. And I looked at them and I said, no way. My brother's not dead. You're just jealous. And they go, well, we heard it on the news. And when I got home, Mama was sitting in a chair surrounded by people, and I knew it was true. I just ran to her and I said, not Richie. Mama, no. And I just remember, you know, falling on my knees and burying my head in her lap.
I was so sure that that wasn't him on the plane. I was so sure that it was wrong, that I'd call the house or I'd go over there and everything would be fine. It wouldn't be him. He was on the bus. But it was wrong.
I remember Donna coming over with her sister. And they'd hold us on her, she'd hold us on her lap. And she'd cry and we'd cry. You know, and there wasn't a lot of people to hold us during those times.
In Texas, former cricket guitarist Nicky Sullivan heard the news from a fan and asked his mother to call Buddy Holly's mother to confirm it.
And when Mrs. Holly answered, I remember we were close to 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. Is it true what I heard about Buddy? Mrs. Holly, Buddy's mother, said, oh, I don't know. What? My God, she didn't know. She had no idea.
My wife told me you better get out of your work clothes and put on some clean clothes and go over to your mother's house. And I said, why? She wouldn't tell me for a little while, and then she said, well, we heard over the radio that Buddy was in a plane crash. And I said, is he alive? She said, I don't know. But she said, I think they said that everyone was dead. And so that's the way we got the news. It was on the air before we ever were notified.
The news soon reached Cricket's drummer Jerry Allison and his wife Peggy Sue.
Jerry was devastated, just paralyzed. It was just like turning the lights out. It, you know, it's like the sun didn't shine, and if it did, who cared? It just had all, it had just stopped.
Buddy's wife, Maria Elena, was grief-stricken when she learned of the crash. Within months, she would miscarry their unborn child.
If you do your best.
In Beaumont, Texas, J.P. Richardson's best friend had just come home after his shift at the radio station when he got the call.
I was stunned. I was numb. I immediately got up and went to the radio station, and it was confirmed that the crash had occurred and that J.P. had perished. And it was the day that our lives stopped.
And there's someone who's watching over you tonight.
Later, I did talk with his wife. It was very difficult for Titi to accept J.P.'s death.
I mean, she was very young, had a 5-year-old daughter, 6 months pregnant with me, and this terrible thing took her husband away.
She could see the end of the rainbow within sight, and it was immediately grabbed away from her.
Over you tonight.
At approximately 1 o'clock in the morning on February 3rd, 1959, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper were killed in a plane crash. Later that morning, the other members of the Winter Dance Party reached the next stop on their tour, and were greeted with the grim news.
The road manager and I walked in the hotel, and there was a TV in the lobby, and there was a picture of the Big Bopper on TV. I said, put me in a room next to Buddy Holly. He said, are you at that show? And I said, yeah. He said, well, then you know those guys got killed in a plane crash. I said, what? He said, just like that. He said, yeah, those guys got killed in a plane crash this morning, so, you know, just bam, we knew about it.
J.P. Richardson was dead, and I was alive. And because he was dead, I was alive.
Although the Winter Dance Party was devastated by the deaths of 3 of its top performers, the tour continued, and that night, Waylon Jennings had to stand in for his pal, Buddy, and sing his song.
I mean, I just wanted to go home, you know. I'd never faced anything like that. I'd never known anyone that close to who had died.
Crying, waiting, hoping you'll come back. I just can't seem to get you off my mind.
Teenagers across the country and around the world were stunned to learn that 3 of rock and roll's brightest stars had been killed in a plane crash.
A lot of the kids, the boys particularly, were already wearing black armbands, and did you hear what happened? They wouldn't even say it out loud, they were whispering it. And it hit us real hard, very, very hard.
I was standing in my living room and came on the radio. The plane went down last night, taking 3 rock and roll players, J.P. Richardson, known as the Big Bopper, Ritchie Valens, and Buddy Holly. And I remember my stomach dropped. And I was standing in this position, my shoulders down, and like you're the radio, shoulders down like this, and I looked at it like that. I stood there for about 15, 20 minutes, didn't move.
In '59, as a paper boy, I went and cut open these papers one day, and there it said, Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Ritchie Valens had been killed in a plane crash. I remember it was just like somebody took it and punched me right in the face. I just couldn't believe it.
Look up in the sky, up towards the north. There are 3 new stars.
20-year-old rocker Eddie Cochran was stunned by the death of his close friend Buddy Holly. Cochran rose to fame with hits like Summertime Blues. Now he sang the blues again in a tribute to the 3 fallen stars.
Gee, we're gonna miss you. Everybody sends their love.
Richie, you were just starting to realize your dreams. Everyone calls me a kid, but you were only 17.
It was the end of an era. It was the end of an innocence for rock and roll. And Ritchie, I think, as much as anybody, embodied that because he was still young, he was still vital. He was at the zenith of his dream when he fell.
I see a stout man. The Big Bopper is your name. God called you to heaven, maybe for new fortune and fame.
I've never seen a complete city come together and grieve the way that town did at that time. And there was a mourning and a sense of loss that was beyond what I could describe today. It was a real experience, a moving experience that I hope I'll never lose complete touch with.
Buddy, I can still see you with that shy grin on your face. Seems like your hair was always a little messed up, kind of out of place. Now, not many people actually knew you or understood how you felt. But just a song from you could make the coldest heart melt.
Eddie Cochran never got over the death of his friend. Ironically, he died in a car crash the following year at the age of 21.
Buddy Holly, I'll always remember you with tears in my eyes.
Gee, we're gonna miss you. Everybody sends their love.
It took the best people off of that tour. It took the best people. I'm talking about kind, good-hearted people that you can't imagine them being bad to somebody. And it took their lives. And I never understood that, and to this day, when I think about that, it makes me a little bit mad.
Given the situation in rock and roll in 1959, the plane crash could have been almost a lethal blow. Elvis was in the Army. Chuck Berry had a little bit of trouble with an underage girl. Jerry Lee Lewis's career was in eclipse because he had married his teenage cousin. Little Richard had decided he didn't want to play rock and roll anymore, and he had joined the ministry. So, the deaths of Buddy Holly and Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper was kind of an exclamation point to this whole period. That plane crash nearly helped bury rock and roll, and we were stuck for a couple of years with a lot of teen idols that didn't have much backbone to their sound until the Beatles came over here and saved our souls.
Pop music progressed from teen idols to the Beatles, and by the early 1970s, Holly, Valens, and the Boppers' music had been stashed away like forgotten oldies. Then Don McLean wrote about the day the music died.
I started singing Bye, Bye, Miss American Pie.
American Pie speaks to the loss that we feel. That's why that song has found the niche that it has.
I'm singing this will be the day that I die.
A decade after the deaths of Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper, memories of the tragedy inspired the song that would become a pop anthem.
When 1970 came around and I was now beginning to make records, I suddenly began to write about Buddy Holly and remembering what happened. And started out with, a long, long time ago.
Long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile.
Shortly after Buddy died, like the next year, my father died. And I had been still trying to come to terms with my father's death and with Buddy Holly's death and with all these things that had happened. And so I put this in the song.
Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride. But something touched me deep inside the day the music died. So bye, bye, Miss American Pie.
I only dedicated the album to Buddy. I never said it was about him, but the radio people sensed right away that there was this connection with the day the music died and the dedication on the album. They would play American Pie, and they played That'll Be the Day. And I remember hearing that on the radio and thinking, well, this is great. This is amazing, what music can do. I'm bringing Buddy back to everybody.
Do you believe in rock and roll? Can music save your mortal soul? And can you teach me how to dance real slow?
American Pie struck a chord, and in January 1972, 13 years after the tragic crash, it was the #1 record in the country.
I was on a boat, and I heard that song once, down in Fort Lauderdale. And I started crying. That's how much the song means to me. Not only to me, it means a lot to others as well.
McLean, with one really deft brushstroke, brought it all back home to people and helped put those performers back on the map.
Singing bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye and singing this will be the day that I die.
While Don McLean's anthem, American Pie, reminded rock and roll fans about the day the music died, it was a movie that brought Buddy Holly back to life.
All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy.
I discovered Buddy when I was in the 6th grade. Holly's music was such a force in my life because it lifted me. It made me feel good. It made me feel strong.
All of my life I've been waiting. Tonight there'll be no hesitating, no boy.
Gary Busey had idolized Buddy Holly for more than 20 years. In 1978, he got the chance to play his hero in the Buddy Holly story. Busey's transformation into Buddy Holly earned him an Academy Award nomination.
And I had these glasses to look through with my hair all curled up and permanent. And there was no more Gary Busey. I couldn't find Gary Busey in the movie. So I will tell you this, that playing Buddy Holly was the first experience I had making film. In fact, it's the only experience I've had making film where the spirit was with me and wrapped itself around me.
Just you know why.
Gary Busey wasn't the only one moved by Holly's spirit. For Buddy's widow, Maria Elena, the film stirred deep emotions.
I met Maria Elena when the movie premiered, and she started weeping and left during the song, Just You Know Why, True Love Ways. I thought, boy, we really messed up, but no, Buddy was in the room with her.
You know why, just you and I know true love ways.
A decade later, in 1987, La Bamba resurrected the memory of Richie Valens. As he researched and acted the leading role, Lou Diamond Phillips connected emotionally with Richie's family.
For me and for the family, and in a very weird way, in a very sort of existential way, it was Richie all over again. Richie was there.
I know I put Lou through some stuff. I mean, he did become Richie to me for those 3 months.
The only time it ever became a real issue and it became a difficulty was the night that we shot the scene where Marshall Crenshaw playing Buddy Holly and myself and Stephen Lee as the Big Bopper get into the plane to take off, to fly away. It was Connie. She came to the set, which might not have been such a good idea for her.
Hey, Richie, relax, man. Everything's cool. Besides, the sky belongs to the stars, right?
She just starts trembling and she says to me, "Why did you go? Why did you have to go? Richie, why did you have to go?" And she throws herself onto me, and she's crying, and I'm holding her, and she's just sobbing over and over. "Why did you have to go? Why did you have to go?" And it was, I was lost at that time. I had no idea what to do.
There was so much pain still that we had never been able to just let out. We had never really been able to grieve because everybody used to tell us, be quiet, don't cry. And with La Bamba, all of us were able to finally, I guess, accept, let go.
If you do your best.
While the making of La Bamba was a healing experience for Richie Valens' family, for the Big Bopper's son, born 3 months after his father's death, finding closure has been more difficult.
I wasn't raised knowing that my father was somebody special. I just know that when I got into my teenage years, I asked questions, and I wasn't given answers.
One time I was in Houston, and I was sitting on the bus before I went on. We was fixing to do a concert, and this guy, he's about 20 years old, bounced on the bus and plopped down beside me, and he said, "My name is Big Bopper Jr., and I want you to tell me about my daddy." And I looked at him, it really shocked me. So I said, "Your daddy was a good old boy and a hell of a crap shooter, and how in the hell did you get on this bus?"
The Big Bopper's son also asked Bob Hale about his dad's last hours at the Surf Ballroom.
At that particular time, Buddy's wife was expecting, the Bopper's wife was expecting, and my wife was expecting. And while we were sitting there, J.P. Richardson said to my wife, "Kathy, may I put my hand on your tummy?" And she said, "Sure." She said, "This is what I miss most about being on the road, feeling my baby move in my wife's tummy." And when I told this story to J.P.'s son a few years ago, the tears just flowed. Because he said, "Bobby, I'm trying to find out who my daddy is." And he said, "Now I know my daddy loved me before I was born." That's what I remember most about that night.
Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a pony.
You know, Dad's, he's more than a footnote to Buddy Holly's death and Ritchie Valens' death. Chantilly Lace was released in August of '58. Dad was killed less than 6 months later. And the song lives today. And does it live?
Oh, baby, that's what I like!
Today, J.P. carries on his father's rock and roll legacy with his own band.
Some kids, their mother or father pass on, leave them a hardware store, real estate, big fat chunk of change. My dad left me his name and maybe a little bit of his voice. White lightning.
4 decades after the crash, the music of 3 of rock and roll's early pioneers lives on.
Let me in, honey. This is the Big Bopper knocking.
The Big Bopper's music is heard in any rock band that wants to get a little goofy now and then. He was the clown prince of his day. Ritchie Valens can be heard in the music of Los Lobos, in the music of every rock and roll band that features a Latino performer.
Oh, the little things you say and do make me want to be with you.
Buddy Holly's everywhere. He's everywhere. Anytime some kid plugs a Fender guitar into an amp, he's there.
In a cornfield on the outskirts of Clear Lake, Iowa, a simple memorial marks the site where the plane carrying Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper fell from the sky on February 3, 1959. Every February, on the anniversary of the tragedy, rock fans come here to pay tribute to the fallen stars. They gather at the now legendary Surf Ballroom to celebrate their music.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna...
That stage is, that ballroom is a bit of a shrine for me.
After the crash, DJ Bob Hale left KIRB in Iowa, went to Chicago, and became a popular broadcasting personality.
I will say, honestly and unashamedly, I have stood there and said, thank you, Lord, for allowing me to have worked here. And I thank the Lord for allowing me to have met those 3 young men.
That'll be the day.
It don't seem possible that it's that long a time, because they live in my mind as they were when they were the entertainers that night.
Carol Anderson managed the Surf Ballroom until 1967. He still lives in Clear Lake.
It hurt me pretty deeply when I think about it, why 3 young people like that, clean cut, that it'll wipe all 3 of them out.
I smile. Every time I hear the song, I smile. You know, that's my song.
Donna Fox, the woman who inspired Ritchie Valens, married and had 5 children. Her California license plate reads, Donna.
Just the other night, I had someone who said, "You're Ritchie Valens, Donna, aren't you?" So they haven't forgotten him. So that's important. They haven't forgotten him.
If you knew Peggy Sue, then you know why I feel blue without Peggy.
Peggy Sue Guerin and Cricket's drummer Jerry Allison divorced in the 60s. Peggy Sue still lives in Lubbock.
A lot of the 13-year-old boys, which I might add are avid Buddy Holly fans around the world, they write to me and they say, the music makes me feel, and it's okay to feel. It's okay to have a girlfriend. It's okay to be excited. It's even okay to cry. And I think that's the strength of the music.
Love you, Peggy Sue.
After Nicky Sullivan left the Crickets, he formed his own band. 12 years later, he quit music altogether and is now a businessman in Missouri.
As of 1978, 350 artists had recorded our music. The number is double that now, even 20 more years after the fact. That's the legacy that was left. I wish there was a way that Buddy could find out. Maybe he knows. Who knows?
Tommy Alsop went on to produce Willie Nelson's first recordings. He lives in Nashville, where he continues to produce records and play guitar.
Everywhere I go, people, you know, when they hear my name and somebody will mention something about Buddy Holly, they'll, oh, yeah, how come you wasn't on that plane, you know? And people still remember it.
Never a week goes by that I don't think about it.
After the death of his friend Buddy, Waylon Jennings began recording his own music and became one of country music's leading artists, selling over 40 million records worldwide.
I wonder what they would have been doing now, you know. I didn't know Ritchie Valens well enough to know. He was smart and a good musician and a good writer. So he would have still been in it. The Big Bopper would probably own most of the radio stations in the country. And Buddy probably would have had his own label. He was a great idea man, and he loved music. I don't think he would ever quit singing.
The day the music died, they say, but the music didn't die. Of course, Buddy's not with us anymore, but the music's still here.
There's no excuses or reasons for why it stays alive. It just is. As simple as that.
Well, alright, so I'm being foolish. Well, alright, let people know about the dreams and wishes you wish in the night.
You were raised on radio? Prove it. What was the biggest song of 1978? How about 1967? Find out as host John Lovitz looks back on 40 years of the Billboard Top 40, featuring every year's #1 single and the pop culture phenomenons and news events that rocked the world. Monday nights beginning at 8/7 Central, only on VH1.
Well, alright, so I'm going steady. It's alright when people say that those foolish kids can't be ready.